Thank you, Patrick. You nailed it. It's perfect French. So, I'm Emilie St-Pierre. I am a security analyst for Rapid7. I've been in the information security community for over 5 years. I have a soft spot for social engineering, for open source intelligence, for privacy. I've worked a lot with our Las Vegas hackerspace called SynShop. And you can find me on Twitter at LabFox for any slides, any links that you're going to see in the presentation today that we're going to go over. You're going to find it there. I'm sure you're going to tweet them as well. And who are you?
Who am I? Hi, everybody. I'm this guy. So I'm Robby Stewart. I've consultant with Rapid7. I've been in the IT industry for about 12 years. About the seven-ish of it has been around focusing on security in some way or another. I've conducted countless phishing attacks and physical attacks working with Rapid7. Everything from small mom and pop shops to large organizations. So I've got a good deal of experience with it. My primary focus for work and what I really love to do is social engineering. Phishing being a portion of that, but I really love the physical stuff. That's really what I enjoy the most. So, hi.
Thank you. And I'm just going to clip this. All right. A little overview of today's talk. I'm going to go over the OSINT methodology for electronic social engineering. These are mostly things or steps that I use, that Robby uses, that maybe you'd like to use when you're conducting any kind of electronic social engineering tests. Then Robby's going to take over and talk about results. So we went over a lot of our internal reports regarding phishing, regarding vishing, regarding different types of electronic social engineering, and what works, what doesn't work. You're going to find out soon. Then I'll come back with a few tips and tricks, and one of the things that we're really excited to share with you today are some free phishing templates, some free pretexts, basically. So, fun fact also, 32% of our slides contain Steve Buscemi. I'd like to start with a story about setting clear goals, as you can tell. Now, a few months ago, I was conducting this phishing campaign for a healthcare client. And it went pretty well. My colleague and I, we were able to achieve kind of our goal, which was to get shells into the network, to get a lot of different types of credentials. So we're really happy about it. But as I was working on the report, the client came back to me and asked, hey, why weren't you able to get all of the link clicks for the engagement, and why weren't you able to tell me who opened certain types of emails? And it was a very uncomfortable moment, but basically what I realized was that we hadn't set clear enough goals. Ultimately it was fine, but on one side, what I realized that my client was asking was for some data sets that they use internally, right? So when we sold the phishing engagement to our client, when we were doing it, our client was expecting us to have the kinds of data that he has on his side when he's conducting his internal phishing assessments. Whereas on my side, the red team side, I was coming at it from, well, let's see where your weak points are. Let's see how I was able to access your network, right? So my goal is to tell a story about what steps I took to achieve compromise. And he was more like, well, who fished, who did what? So how do we avoid situations like this? Well, we set clear goals. And setting and understanding your goals will really shape how you're going to approach OSINT and how you're going to approach your pretexts and everything for your engagement, right? And so there's some good questions to ask, such as, what are you looking to measure? What are you looking to test? Is it only user behavior? right? Who clicked what? Who opened the email? Who didn't open the email? Are your employees reporting suspicious emails or phone calls? Infiltration. Is it easy to bypass your target's defenses? What steps did I take to compromise your network, or did Robby take to compromise your network? Detection. Are you looking to see if your team can detect a social engineering attempt? And if so, how? Other questions that are important to go over are, what type of data are you or your client expecting? So in my example earlier, I was talking about opened emails, link clicks, but also perhaps are you looking to see how many alerts your security solution is giving you? Are you expecting, do you have an email security appliance that you're expecting to catch certain types of payloads? Is this the first time that you're conducting a phishing engagement or an electronic social engineering engagement, or is this 100th time? This question is really important on how you approach your engagement, right? If this is the first time, you're not going to go guns blazing and take like the hardest pretext and something super covert, right? You're going to start with something pretty simple and just see, like, do they do the basics, right? Can users even spot like a pretty beginner pretext? And is the engagement going to be reoccurring? So there's actually a really good book by Chris Hadnagy and Michelle Fincher. They go over kind of the different levels of phishing pretexts. And this is a really good guide as to the different steps you should be taking if you are planning on having any kind of internal assessment of user behavior or of continuing education. Two last questions. Will you be integrating an educational component? That's just basically to know, when I compromise your users, am I going to let them know that they've been compromised? Will they get a little page that says, you've been hacked? This is what you missed. These were some clues that you missed. Or will I stay covert until the end of the engagement? Finally, will multiple pretexts be used during an engagement? And that's mostly because you can do a general phishing pretext and target maybe 1,000 people. Or maybe you want to target different groups in your organization. So perhaps you want to do both. So just some questions really to keep in mind before you start doing anything else. Okay, so once you have set your goals, then you can start looking at OSINT target areas. And I've classified them into 4 main areas. So we have technology, people, presence, industry. And as you can tell, there's definitely some overlap. These are just kind of logical areas to help you as you go along on your OSINT journey. So industry, what that is mostly a high-level category. It includes broad data such as compliance standards, maybe some laws that you should be aware of that your target has to follow, or regulations. Any kind of maybe big industry news that made the news recently. Any kind of huge breaches. Then there's technology. So technology is really anything that they use technology-wise, such as what kind of operating systems are they using, any specialized technology. If they're, for example, in healthcare, maybe they use Epic, maybe they use SCADA systems, so they use certain types of Siemens software. Technology also includes, for this category, domains, subdomains, so you want to enumerate those to see where their kind of presence is online, which brings me to kind of that presence area where you want to look at their online presence, perhaps on social media. What are employees doing? What are they sharing? A really good tip that Robby has is try to look for employees that might be oversharing on social media. because you might find some badges, some employee badges inside of some buildings. Maybe you'll see some kind of lingo that they use, which would be perhaps more in the people category, where what kind of terms are they using, what kind of language are they using internally that might help you build rapport later. Another thing to keep in mind, of course, in the people category is all of your emails, employee names, phone numbers, anything that's related to the organization, where people are in the organization. Are they a contractor? Are they full-time? What area of the organization are they in, etc. So this is a high-level overview of how you can look at it all and how it can overlap. So I'm going to start with technology. With the meat of things, domain and subdomain enumeration. These are all resources that I am sharing with you because although you could go find a list that has all of the different tools that you can use for enumeration, these tend to be really long lists. There's lots of tools that do the same thing. So I'm going to keep it really simple in everything that we're looking at today because I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed. I just want you to help achieve your goal as fast and as best as possible. So we have this AppSecCo subdomain enumeration cheat sheet. It's really great. So you'll find different types of resources there, such as some of our actually very own Rapid7 data sets. We have an open data project where we look at everything that's kind of on the internet. And so you can use that to look at domains and subdomains. There's certificate transparency logs I can also use and search through. There's so many different ways to grab that kind of information that I just wanted to share the cheat sheet by itself. It's simple, it's to the point. Another really good way to do that is with Chris Transer's Eyewitness tool. What this tool does is it captures screenshots of your different web services. So you give it a list of IPs or URLs, and then it's going to come back with a report, give you all of these. And so as you're going through the report, as you're going through also the subdomains or the domains, look out for some keywords that are going to be helpful for you later in your pretext, such as login, secure, VPN, employee, things of the sort. These keywords, you really want to jot them down because they might lead to some portals that will be easy to clone later on. So once you have domains, subdomains, and an idea of what kind of those look like, you might want to also check out open services. This is another way to see what they're using. Operating systems, specialized technology, just open services. Maybe you'll find some open shares. Maybe you'll see the iKettle, port 2222. So some very specific things. And the reason why I listed both Shodan and Census is really because the results are slightly different. So if you only use Shodan or if you only use Census, they kind of do the same thing in that you'll get some information about open port services and a little bit of fingerprinting, but sometimes they complete each other. So definitely worthwhile to do both. All right. And then another thing to look out for, repos and secrets. So of course you can do a simple GitHub search and try to find which repos is your target using. You can also use a really nifty tool by Mitch Henriksen called GitRob. GitRob's really cool. It's going to kind of download some repos and some past versions of repos. It's going to look at the history, and it'll, once it downloads them, it's going to parse through them and give you some interesting API keys, if it has some, passwords, maybe some interesting comments. And it delivers that, again, because I like that format, in a really nice report for you to kind of just go through and go straight to the meat and bones of secrets. Another thing to keep in mind, searching through cloud storage, Amazon Web Services, are they using buckets? Are they storing some things that maybe they shouldn't be storing in AWS? You should find that out because you never know what kinds of files are on there, right? Perhaps they're storing employee files or some employee handbooks. Perhaps there's something there that would really just help you with your pretext later on. So these are two tools, one for AWS by Jordan Potty called AWS Bucket Dump, and another one for Azure called Azurite by MWR Labs. Finally, and actually probably most importantly, what AV, what security appliance are they running? That's probably just finding that out, if you can find that out. If you do see a type of firewall that's open on Shodan and Census, if you can see that some of their email messages are signed with some email security appliance, jot that down, because knowing that might be the difference between having a successful pretext and having one that just won't work. It gets filtered through, your payload catches it. Really important. So yeah, if you do not know, by then you can't find a security appliance or a kind of security solution that they're using, job postings is also another thing to keep in mind. Moving along to people, another important factor in determining success is the amount of data that you have on your targets. So, of course, you want to know your employee names because it helps you create mailing lists, email lists, provided that you have the format that they use. Emails in and of themselves are good, but it's still a little bit incomplete. Job titles are great because depending on the pretext you're using, you might want to impersonate someone, or you might want to exclude a certain group of people from your phishing, such as IT security. So all of these by themselves are really great, and there are two resources for that. The first one that you can see up top on the right is connect.data.com. This is a Salesforce website, and it's been ongoing for years now. It has everything that you might need right there on the website. Here's an example for Rapid7. So you have the employee names, which I did just kind of blur out. Company, the title, you have the city they're in, so you know their location, so which office they're in. And best of all, you have updated, which means when was that information updated to the Salesforce database. And so you can also know like if someone perhaps is a new hire, or if your information is still relevant. So you could try to find all of these things in and of themselves, or you can just do the one-stop shop of connect.data.com and of LinkedIn. Depending on what kind of goals you have set previously, you may also want to just collect emails. So I do suggest the Simply Email tool by Simply Security for that. And if you're going through LinkedIn and you don't want to be typing things manually, but just want a tool to parse everything it finds on LinkedIn based on a target organization and make it nice and neat for you, LinkedIn to username is a really popular one that's open source. So that's it for employees. Now for customers. Every once in a while, we'll get a client that wants us to post as a customer and kind of see what we can find out. And I have a really neat story about that. So my target was a customer helpline. And this insurance company, they sell auto insurance, home insurance, and property insurance, some home, auto, insurance package deals. And they're like, okay, great. We want you to post as a customer and see how far the helpline is going to help you. And if you can find any kind of policy information, or what can you do with the information you find? Can you have anyone cancel or change their policy? So I was like, how would I know who is a customer? So I just did some Googling. I'm a customer of Wayland Industries or Wayland Insurance, or I've used Wayland Industries, or I have tried Wayland Industries, and I was kind of going through the motions of like seeing, does anything interesting pop up? And a forum post popped up, and it was this guy who's talking about how he uses that insurance, and he's about to go on vacation, so he's asking some questions, and he had a certain username. I took that username and I tried to see all of his previous posts, and then I started having his location. So I had his location, I had his username, and then in his profile he also put down his email. With these three things, I was able to get his full name. I was able to find his Facebook page. His Facebook page was completely open, so I was able to get a picture of his car. The picture just so included his license plate number, make, model, year, color, and then I learned he had a wife that was also on the policy, because he also wrote about that on a veterans blog, and I was like, great. And then thanks to some open source data, I also found his car's vehicle number. So I was able to pose as his wife and say, I don't have much, but here's all the information I have on my car. We're currently out of the country on vacation, because that's what he had posted about. And I really need to change the auto policy, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, well, would you like us to change the policy? I stopped there, right? Because I didn't want to do that. But there you go. And now I showed that they should really implement perhaps some kind of different verification that's not based on open source intelligence. But it was really fun. Yes?
What categories of information do you presume are not open source?
So open source data, what I mean by that, or open source intelligence, is all forms of data that are open to the public. They're not anything that's classified, they're not anything that's internal to an organization, or like secrets, trade secrets.
What categories specifically do you presume are not open source? That's the initial question.
I think his question is like, Social Security numbers are now assumed to be
Oh.
So things like that.
But I assume? I don't know. I don't really assume anything.
If you want to validate a customer as
Right.
being your customer and not someone calling in randomly, what type of information do you think would actually do that?
Okay.
Password of the day.
Yeah. Say like a password of the day or a PIN, like, because it's hard. It can get pretty much into a gray area here, right? Because I think I get where you're trying to go.
Absolutely.
Which is
I think you.
So I know some like home security system places, they set up like a verbal password for your account. So if the alarm goes off, you have to tell them your verbal password, or if you say something different, they'll still call the cops out to you. So attaching something like that to an account might be useful.
Two ways
And
that
how do you distribute that? The next question.
When the customer is setting up their account, that's when you would have them give you something like that.
there's
but
also
now you store it
They
online,
established.
But now you store it online somewhere.
You store it internally in your databases with your user or with your customer's information.
And how is that not eventually an open source?
because so open source is like how you want to determine where your data should be. Like maybe we can assume that something becomes open source with time, but I think that would rather, the good term to use would rather be this is your data that has become insecure. It's not meant to be open source because it's not meant to be shared publicly, like with the general public. So because something is insecure doesn't mean necessarily they're open source. They're kind of two different concepts. And I think, like, how do you get around that when someone just starts having so much of your information online? Or like, such as, you know, this man like my customer wants to share everything about their their life online, what can I do? And one of my suggestions for that was you can do password of the day, you can do a two-factor authentication app that gives you a number that changes. You can set, but more simply, you can just set up a password like banks do, right? They're going to be like, what's the answer to your secret question? And something of the sort.
Those secret questions are things that you can find on an unsecure Facebook page.
Correct. So that, it really depends on your risk model. Do you want to, are you okay with that risk? Your customers are more at risk, but really you can say, well, it's more on them than on me as an organization, or do I just really want to foster as secure a culture for my customers as well as internally as I
The
can?
point of your story was that your customer needed a better verification strategy rather than you getting all this fairly freely accessible data.
Exactly.
So knowing your policy number or having some additional password would have mitigated this attack.
Exactly.
Yeah, what I've recommended to companies in the past is two things. If you have an online portal that people log onto, like a SaaS provider or for an insurance company, their website that you log onto for your customer portal, having a phone verification password that's prominently on the top there, so that if you phone in, the agent directs you there and says, hey, can you read to me what's the phone verification password? That's a good way. If you don't have that or don't have it yet because it takes time to implement, then having the agent email a password over to the person calling in by email. It's not encrypted, but it's really hard to intercept that, like en masse. Of course it's doable, but for that kind of risk model, it's okay. So you have something super easy that the agent can push out, get instant verification over the phone, and then you can continue.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm going to continue to people. No, sorry. So that's how I felt basically at the end of this story. Was just putting everything together and trying to prove how it could be insecure. But it was fun. Anyways, industry. So I mentioned a bit earlier, things that are included in the industry area are things such as compliance, regulations, and just a quick list of federal compliance and regulations. This is a link for that. I didn't put too many because, truth be told, I just Google like compliance standards X industry, and usually I'll start reading there. But for some that, it's good to know which ones are applicable if you don't want to always repeat the same ones if you're using a lot of the compliance training pretexts. Other interesting stuff, legal cases. Another way I could have gotten perhaps a customer, or rather probably a former customer's name, first name, last name, would be to look at court cases that the organization has been involved with. So dockets.justia.com is one resource that's free and doesn't require you to register. You can also go just straight to the source with the U.S. Courts website, which is free if you quarterly don't use, if you buy less than $15 worth per quarter of court records, it's free. Anyways, and then the FDA has these really cool warning letters, and you can try to find companies that have gotten FDA warning letters and also use that into a pretext later on. So I just thought that was really original, and so I put it there just for fun, if you're impersonating legal or maybe some kind of inspection or third-party auditor, something of this sort. And finally, the last area we're going to be looking at is presence. So as I mentioned earlier, social media. I love this website called inteltechniques.com. It's run by Michael Bazzell, who has this book on just open source intelligence techniques, and he has all of these different tools for looking at various types of social media or email or telephone domains. And it's great because you kind of put in the name of the person or their handle, populate everything, and then it will just pop out all of these different results for different websites, so you don't have to just manually go through like every website one after the other. It just gives you everything. Of course, present means you should know their physical locations. What offices do they have? Where? Are they an international company? Are they a small mom and pop down the street company? You also want to look at sensitive files. If you want to look at all sorts of different types of files and emails and domains and subdomains and everything that I have talked about so far, there's a really good tool that does that for you. It's Discover Scripts by Lee Baird. He updates this tool all the time, and I do recommend it for just helping you out doing some OSINT. It really covers a lot of different broad areas. And finally, searching for proprietary or unique terms. If a company uses a very unique term for something that they use with clients, like a customer ID, they have like their own customer ID like name for it, this is great because then you'll start Googling it. And it's very easy to have targeted information about it. Another very short story. I did that for a different kind of insurance company. And I was just trying to find stuff about them. I was trying to see if I could cancel someone's policy again. Sorry, I do that a lot. While I was just Googling for these different types of things, I just wanted an employee ID or one of their policy numbers. It's like, cool, okay, they had a very interesting name for policy number. I Googled that, and then the company name, and boom, I found a cached web page for the portal of this insurance company. And I don't know how this happened, but Google was able to spider a page that required authentication. And so in the search results, I had access to this one client's policy page, and I was able to not only view their name, their address, their policy information. It was like a $3.2 million house in California, but I could cancel it right then and there. So if anything happened, they would have no coverage. And that was for anyone to see on Google. And even if they took it out, there was still, there's cached versions. So it was a nightmare, but thankfully I found it thanks to OSINT. So this is it for my part. And now I'm going to hand it over to Robby for some story time.
You guys want to go fishing? There we go. Hope that works. All right, so I want to tell you guys a story. It's kind of go over a lot of what Emilie was talking about, using a lot of OSINT ahead of time to build a pretext and use that pretext in an engagement. So I started off my engagement using a tool called ReconNG. If you've never heard of it, definitely look it up. It's really good. Inside of ReconNG, there's a module to do domain suffix brute forcing. It can take a really long time to run, but it's worth it. So I had a domain. I kicked it off against that domain. It enumerates all the start of authorities or TDLs for this organization that they had owned. And what I found at the end of it, after it running for like a day and a half, was that the organization owned a lot of regional domains. So they owned like company name.us, .eu, .au, .asia, all these regional domains. They owned all of them because they were a global company. But they didn't own .de for Germany. So now I own .de for Germany. I bought it for $10 and I could sell it for $3,000. I was like, wow, that's interesting. So I now own a domain of I own their name, .de, and I need to leverage this in a phishing engagement. Oh, I need to take a step back. So this engagement wasn't just phishing. It was actually a physical assessment that had a phishing component to it. So my overarching idea of how to gain access was going to involve this phishing. I was going to leverage it so hard that they were going to have to let me inside of the building. So going back to the story, I now own .de. but I need someone who works for the company and is in Germany. So off to LinkedIn I go. Doing some special filtering in LinkedIn, I find like director of IT stuff who works in Germany. He's based in Germany. Yes, got my guy. I set up a mailbox for that user, and just a small tip: if you're doing phishing engagements, configure a mailbox for your delivering email. Because sometimes you'll have people that will reply to you and say, hey, that link didn't work for me, or the payload you just gave me wouldn't run. So you can have a live interaction with someone. Trust me, it happens. Do it. But in any case, small tangent, I set up the email for this guy. I crafted up a pretext that was proof point secure message. The company that I was doing the work for delivered to me, gave me a list of targets. They're like, these are all the guys we want you to target. Send your stuff to these guys. See how good they are. So I sent my phishing email. It's just got a fancy little click here link in it, and the link took you to a landing page of mine. It's just a basic landing page. There's nothing super fancy about it at all. Had their company logo on it. Said log in. You log in, it kicks you back to the login page, so it just puts you in this infinite loop. I sent it to all of the targets, and out of all of those targets, 10 people opened and clicked on the link, but only one person provided me credentials. That's a pretty good ratio. However, it only takes one. So I took this guy's creds. He didn't just give me one set of creds, he gave me 2 sets of creds. So I had access to his internal email, and also some additional things off to the side as well. I'm stealing one of these waters. And I leveraged his email to try to send a payload to the rest of my targets. So now I had a set of creds, I did some harvesting, but I also wanted some shells, because who doesn't want shells? So I grabbed one of his emails from his inbox, sent it off to everybody with an attached payload. Unfortunately, it got stripped. The company I was doing the work for got a little upset with the way that I did things, so we took a step back for a day, and it kind of hampered my physical, because my overarching plan: cause havoc with the phishing email. Let them know that this happened. Let them know it happened. So the next day I can show up on site. I'm part of IR. I need access to all of your stuff and your data center and these other locations. Give me access because I'm IR. But that got hampered, so darn, that sucks. Moral of the story, I still got into their office building, and it was with a $10 box of donuts. So OSINT's important because I was able to find their domains, I was able to find a user to target or to become, and without that, I don't think my initial email would have worked, but hey, that's what happens.
Saying OSINT and donuts.
Yes, OSINT and donuts. That should be a thing. It is now. All right, so I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the research components of what Emilie and I did. So we took 60 reports, internal Rapid7 reports, that had to do with what we call ESE, or electronic social engineering. We wanted to look at those reports and pull out some data sets and kind of get an idea of what was working for us and what wasn't working for us. What's a good pretext, what's a bad pretext. So we did have data points like, well, was OSINT performed? Did the customer provide emails, or did we discover those emails? What kind of payloads the testers were using? Were they successful or not? So we'll kind of step into it. Our first question, of course, was OSINT performed or not? We found there were 3 answers, really. It was yes, no, and maybe the tester didn't say anything about OSINT in their report. And we looked at all the numbers that we found for people who were doing OSINT or mentioned it, and the largest point there was a 0. So, well, why was it a 0? That was really kind of weird. But when we looked into it a little farther, we found that 0 was really coming from the no's and the not applicables, because it was really customer provided data. So we're seeing that more customers were providing us our target lists for the ESE engagements than us discovering them. Go forward. No, there was like 3 slides there. I don't understand it. But whatever. So moving forward, we wanted to move on from that and look at, well, what kind of pretexts were people using and what was working for them. And what we found overarchingly is that people were really just harvesting creds. That was the main type of pretext that we were delivering. We also found people were also just tracking if the links were clicked and trying to deliver payloads. And then there was a small section there that was both harvesting credentials and payloads. There were some customers that also wanted to know if we would be able to attain sensitive information. These engagements were more of a pretext in an email that was followed up with a phishing phone call. And then one of the last things that I wanted to know the most out of all of our reports was, were we using SMB image tags? And if you guys aren't using SMB image tags in your phishing emails and on your landing pages, I highly recommend you do it, because if the target system sees the image tag, then you're more than likely going to be able to capture credentials off of it. So do it, because who doesn't want free creds?
Robby, can you give a real quick what's an SMB image tag do?
I'm going to loop back around to that. Yeah, it's coming. You guys will see some of that. There's a little bit of detail on it. So I want to take a look at 2 different pretexts that I pulled out of our reports and kind of go over the things that I really like about the pretext and the things that I think are a little lacking or might be damaging on the pretext that might get it burned. So this first one is about harvesting credentials. And I know the text is just really small and you guys probably can't read it, and that's all right, because that's not too important, but I'll give you the gist of what the email's about. This one's really comes from the IT security department, and it generally talks about the fact that the company was part of a compromise or something to that effect. And users needed to validate that their passwords weren't part of the compromise. And you see there's a list of instructions to take to validate your password with a neat little click here link. So the things that I like about it is it's one of the things that Chris, I think he's in here, was talking about. There's this like constraint on time in the emails. Like, this is something you need to do now. Do it now. What were the other things I liked about it? The subject was very important, because, hey, we were part of a compromise and you need to do a thing about it. Do your best to keep us all secure. And there was an incentive on making sure that the user's going to be able to say, hey, cool, I wasn't part of this compromise. The things that I don't really like about it is, first off, it's a very lengthy email. Some people are probably going to see this in their inbox and go, no, I got time for that. I'll get back to you after my nap. Another thing I didn't really like about it is the signature is kind of lacking. It's just sincerely corporate IT security. Some kind of branding in there, like a little tag or the image of whatever the organization's logo is. That would have been neat. It would have helped. And the thing I think I don't like about it the most is, if you can really see it or not, it's from ITsec_no reply. I don't know about you guys, but I've never worked for an organization that has distribution emails that have a no reply in the title of the distribution email. That would be a red flag for me. So those are some of the things that I didn't really care for about it. Moving on to this next one. This was for delivering a payload. We'll just say it's generally about like an Excel sheet with maybe a malicious macro in it. Again, just the email. It's open enrollment time. Hey, here's this Excel document. It's going to talk to you about your open enrollment choices. Be sure to click the enable button when the macro says it needs to run. Oh yeah, this sheet's definitely going to help you with your benefit election for the year. Make sure to do it. So the things I like about it is very similar things, actually. The subject is something that, as all of us working for corporations know, you go through open enrollment and you want to take care of your health insurance. So that's an important thing. Then that time restraint that comes around with that. You only have, what, like a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 to do your open enrollment. And while we're on engagement, it's only like 5 to 7 days or whatever. So we need people to click on things now. Do it right now. We'll get back to you. And then the incentive is, hey, we got to take care of your open enrollment, because who doesn't want health insurance, especially in these days and age? Oh, bloody allergies. I apologize. And this is the things that I don't like about it are, again, the same. The signature, sincerely, blah, 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 open enrollment team. I don't know about you guys, but again, I've never worked for an organization that has an entire team dedicated to open enrollment for the whole year. That's a little bit odd. The length is not as long as the last one, but it's still pretty lengthy. And the salutation is "Dear Employee." That's very, like, not very fitting. If I got an email that was "Dear Employee," I would be thinking, oh crap, I'm getting fired. Okay, which brings us around to the SMB image tags and me, like, trying to beat it into your guys' heads. Use them, use them, use them, use them, use them, use them, use them. Use them on everything. Use them in your phishing emails. Use them on your landing pages. Use them on the second landing page. Use them on, I don't know, a keyboard that you mail to them. Just include them on everything. It's pretty easy to set up a server that's going to capture these. And all it is just an HTML image tag. It is bracket image source instead of HTTP or HTTPS or FTP or wherever you're hosting your file. It's file : // IP or whatever to your server, your control server. And when a Windows system sees this image tag, it's automatically going to try to do an SMB authentication out to the server and try to grab that picture and pull it down for you. So it's going to do that authentication request and response. And there are tools like Metasploit and Responder, or if you're feeling really fancy, Multi-Relay. You can capture these with. So definitely do them, because once you capture them, you can toss them into Hashcat. And with that, I'm going to pitch it back over to Emily.
Any questions?
What's that? We got 5.
We have 5 minutes?
Yeah, we got 5 minutes.
We'll have 5 minutes, so after that we can discuss. So some quick tips and tricks, and a lot of phishing, some companies sometimes will say, hey, can you make sure that you put some improper grammar in the phishing emails? Unless it's their first time, their second time, I suggest against that. I think having good grammar, having a professional look and feel in all of your pretext or phishing emails is really important, because it does help, because people are looking for, any kind of indicators. Using SSL and SSL certs, make sure you do that. Absolutely. Why? Because you shouldn't be not using it and sending people's credentials in the clear over the internet. And then certs, just because it helps legitimize your website, and it's free with Let's Encrypt. Domain categorization is another thing you can also do to help your phish get through. Any kind of appliance they might be using usually we'll have a categorization site. You can submit your domain for categorization for them. And again, it helps get through filtering. Connect with your inner marketer. Logos, branding, make it look nice, make it look snappy. Use logos in your signatures, use them on your portals, use them nicely, have fun. There's logo making websites. They take 2 seconds. You have a really nice logo. So just do it, because it looks nice, it's pretty, and people tend to react to that. If something looks nice, they'll tend to want to spend more time on your website. They'll tend to trust your website more, or your company more. Finally, host malicious things in the cloud. AWS is your best friend. AWS is great and does not discriminate at all. It's just like, I love everyone. I love you whether you're malicious or you're nice and secure. So if you can't get a payload, like an attachment to go, just link it to an AWS bucket. I've never seen it fail. We promised some free pretexts when we started, so we do have them up on GitHub. The link will be in the next slide. These are pretexts. You're welcome to use them. If you want to try some phishing campaigns internally, you're welcome to tweak them. Just make sure you have permission before you use them. Every pretext contains kind of a little overview. What type? Are you just looking to capture passwords? And then some variables that will change. And then in the comments, there's also sometimes a few helpful tips and tricks that I've added in there. So these are all yours. If you want to contribute, you're welcome to. We'd love that. Or if you have any thoughts or ideas for pretexts, I'm always looking for some, and so is Robby.